Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is Broc, Gardner versus the world. I'm here again. Another week, another dollar. All right. Hope you guys had a great Christmas. Hope you had a happy New Year. You know, I think it's 2021 by the time I release this episode. Is that correct? Is that a correct assumption? We're in the year 2021, man. January 2nd. That's awesome, man. Cheers to the new year. You know, I hope it's better than the last one. That would be fantastic. My guest this week, who I've been trying to get on for a long time, but I'm very incompetent in my scheduling abilities. Peter Mccormack, probably the biggest guest I've had on this podcast so far. He has a podcast called What Bitcoin Did, where he talks all Bitcoin. He's talked to a lot of different people. Just interviews different people and talks about online currency in the world. He has another podcast called Defiance, where they do kind of like serialized episodes on different things. Right now I'm listening to one about Ghislaine Maxwell, who's the lover of Jeffrey Epstein. It's interesting stuff. It's a good podcast. And so I wanted him on to talk about online currency and Bitcoin, which I found interesting for a long time because just the sheer, like, I don't know how it hasn't like been accepted by society yet. Like, I don't know how we're not using it right now as a common thing. And I'm really fascinated by like the decentralized, which we talk a lot about, the decentralized kind of secure fashion in which it's made, and you can make secure transactions with it. Without any government, any companies interfering, no third parties. I just think that's really cool, and I'm really interested in that part of the world. So we talked a lot about that, and I feel like it was a really interesting conversation. There was some stuff that kind of went over my head, but I tried my best to understand. You know how it goes over here. So yeah, it was good. I appreciate him coming on. Broc Gardner versus the world, Peter Mccormack. Here we go. Peter Mccormack, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are things over in Bedford? Is that where you're at?
Yeah, man. I'm in Bedford. Yeah, Bedford's okay. We've had major storms and flooding this last few days. The town has been flooded the worst it's been since I don't know, maybe like, how old are you, dude?
I'm 17.
Dude, so last time it flooded like this, I was about your age, man.
Yeah.
Like back when I was a teenager, like 20, 25 years ago. It was mad. Like, we took a drive and just fields. Like, we have these floodplains by the river, and they're just covered. It just looks like this huge lake. So yeah, that's been crazy. It's pretty cold, man. But yes, everything's cool.
Yeah, that's wild. We've had actually an opposite in where I'm from, which is Utah. I don't know, in the United States. We've had the driest year. Like, we have no moisture coming down at all, which is crazy because usually it's snowing constantly. So that's where we're at. But that's crazy, man.
No, man.
So
yeah, it's strange.
Yeah. So the gist of this podcast, what I want to talk about is your whole thing. You have a podcast that's pretty successful, I would say. You had like people like Gary Vee, the Winklevoss twins on for interviews, and it's all based around Bitcoin. So my podcast really doesn't have a niche, so most people watching probably really don't know what Bitcoin is or how it works. So could you just break it down for those people? Like, what is not just Bitcoin, but online currency just as a concept?
Yeah, man. Good question. Okay, so if your show isn't a Bitcoin show, it's probably best to try and keep it as simple as possible for people to understand. Because I think these days, like, most people have heard of Bitcoin. It's very rare you meet somebody they're like, oh, what the hell's that? They've usually heard of it, but they maybe don't understand what it is, or, you know, the depth of their knowledge is they've heard about like a hospital's computer systems have been shut down and they've had to pay a ransom in Bitcoin, or, you know, they hear some of the wilder stories. But actually, the best thing to do is just keep it super simple, rather than go into the like massive technical details. The best way I've heard it explained, and I take this, it's from a friend of mine, Vijay Boyapati, who's been on my podcast a couple of times. He says, Bitcoin is like gold. It's digital gold, and it has this magical property that you can teleport it. So what gives gold value? The really, really important thing about gold is that it is scarce. So you have a lot of governments hold gold. You have a lot of investors hold gold. And the reason they hold gold is that the value of currencies can fluctuate, especially if you're in countries that haven't got the best monetary policy. The values can fluctuate. People like to hold gold because it tends to have a stable value. It's referred to as a store of value. So if you were in Lebanon recently when the currency collapsed, if you were holding gold, you would have protected yourselves because you would have been able to hold gold through the currency crisis and sell it at the end of it. So, and then, gold has all these other properties which make it great. It doesn't. It's not corrosive. It doesn't corrode. It doesn't. You can hold a bar of gold for like 100 years, and it retains its kind of unique properties. But the thing about gold is it has two flaws. So the first flaw is that it doesn't work very well as money. If I was like out there in Utah and you and me are hanging out, say we went to a bar, and I know you can't go to a bar.
No.
17, dude. Say we had a game of poker, right? And you end up owing me $200, but you have only got gold. Giving me $200 of gold is really difficult because you kind of got to try and cut a bit off. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't perform very well as money. And secondly, if you want to send me some gold like here to the UK, you'd have to post it, which is a bit of a nightmare. The great thing about Bitcoin is also scarce. It has a fixed limit of 21 million Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. But it solves those two problems that stop gold becoming money, in that if I want to send you $200 of Bitcoin, well, Bitcoin has 8 decimal places. So I would send you like whatever that is, 0.001284, whatever Bitcoin. Then you can have that $200 of Bitcoin. And then secondly, if I want to send it to you, you're out there in the States, all you have to do is send me an address and I send it to you via that address, and you have that within an hour. So that's the best way to explain it. It's like gold, but with this kind of magical property that you can teleport it around the world. Just to add to that, the other thing to think about with Bitcoin, because the other thing people struggle with Bitcoin is they're like, well, what gives it value? Like gold has value because I've got this tangible lump of metal, and it can be used in engineering and manufacturing and jewelry. Like, what gives Bitcoin value? What does it do? And Bitcoin does a couple of other really unique things. If I want to send you money via PayPal, Broc, I can do it, right? I can put it in. But if PayPal is suspicious about why I'm sending you that money, they might block the transfer. They're essentially what you would call a trusted third party. If I want to send you money via the bank, I have to go onto my bank and I have to put in your details, and maybe 3 days, 5 days later, you get that money. The great thing about Bitcoin is decentralized. So what that means is there's no trusted third parties. It's permissionless. If I want to send you Bitcoin, nobody can stop me. Nobody in the world can stop me. I just create the transaction and off it goes to you. That means what we have this term we use called this censorship resistant. It means, and the reason that's important is for a number of people around the world, they do have transactions censored. So for example, in China, there's a limit to how much money you can send out the country because they have capital controls. There's people in parts of the world, for example, right now, there are protests in Belarus against the President Lukashenko, and there's also protests in Nigeria about NSARS. There are people there who are trying to protest, but financially need support. We're able to send them Bitcoin, and the government can't stop us. So that's very cool. It has it's seizure resistant. So if in certain countries in the world, for example, Argentina's had a very bad, poor history with their own money. And there are times where people couldn't get the money out of the bank. But with Bitcoin, you hold it yourself. So it's got all these kind of great properties. A lot of people who are in the world of Bitcoin just think of it as the best money that's ever existed. Like, you can hold it yourself. You don't have to trust the bank. You can send it to anyone and no one can stop you. There's only 21 million, so it's scarce. You can send it all around the world. Yeah, there's all these great properties that make it the best money that's ever existed. So that's a long explanation, but hopefully that's helpful to you and your listeners. I'm sure you've got further questions.
Yeah. So I want to get back to like the censorship side of it later. I have a couple questions on that. But first, I didn't know that there was a set number of Bitcoin. There's 21 million Bitcoin and that's it?
That's it, yeah. So currently, are you aware that Bitcoin is mined?
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. I have no idea what that means, especially if there's a set number. I don't get that.
So if you think about gold, in terms of the way gold is created, it is mined. In gold mines, at the bottom of the ocean, there's various places that gold is mined, and that's how it's created. Well, the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, he had to have a way to give Bitcoin value. And the way you can give Bitcoin value is that it had to be mined, and there had to be a cost of mining it. So the miners essentially solve this every day, trying to solve this complicated algorithm. Every time they solve it, a block is created on the blockchain. And with that, they are issued a certain amount of Bitcoin. Right now, it's, 6.25 per block. I think that's correct. Yeah, 6.25 Bitcoin. But they have to actually solve that algorithm, they have to run a machine that uses electricity. Okay, so that's how Bitcoin is created. So far, 18.5 million of the 21 million has been mined. The final, 2.5 million will take till around 2140 because the amount that's mined is gradually decreasing.
That's crazy.
We can come back to that. Yeah, it is. But yeah. So, and the reason there's only 21 million is if you think right now, if the government makes mistakes, they don't run a budget, don't run a sensible budget, they screw up, they can just go and essentially print money. They can just create money out of thin air.
Yeah.
But as they do that increases what is called the broad money supply. And when you increase the broad money supply, you cause something called inflation. And inflation is essentially a hidden tax on your savings. So if you've got $1,000 in the bank and inflation is at 2%, at the end of that year, you can essentially buy 2% less stuff. You've got 2% lower purchasing power. If inflation is at 4%, it's 4% less. It's a bit like when my parents bought their first house. That house cost them, I think, about £3,000. Now that house currently today, I mean, we're talking 40 years ago they bought that house, but today that house would cost maybe £250,000. The reason being is inflation. Mm-hmm. The great thing about Bitcoin is nobody can print anymore. There's only ever going to be 21 million. So it's a competition, really. It's kind of a race to get how much Bitcoin you can get. So it changes the mindset of people that it teaches you to be prudent about money, to save, to be careful, to value your Bitcoin.
So that's crazy so it's kind of the thing I'm getting from this is that it's basically gold, like value wise, it's basically gold, but it's easier to send and make transactions with it. Because when you think about it, we have like the gold standard, but then in like whenever Nixon was president, got rid of that. And so we've just been printing money and it's been crazy. So now our money's basically worth nothing. But with Bitcoin, with that set 21 million, there's no room for that sort of thing to happen, right?
Yeah, so the gold standard was kind of like there's a really interesting website called WTF Happened in 1971. And you can track a number of different economic measures or a number of different things which happened in that have happened since then in terms of productivity, broad money creation, blah, blah, blah. But essentially speaking, the gold standard was a way of forcing governments to be financially responsible. If they run if they printed too much money, then that would have an impact on the value of the currency. Now people just don't really tend to give a shit. If you look around the world, lots of different governments are just printing money like crazy. And the debt to GDP ratios are getting really high. I think the US debt to GDP ratio is about 135%.
Yeah, it's insane.
The only way to get away from that, the only way to actually protect the government can protect the money is they have to print more, which causes inflation. That's the way they devalue the currency. Now, if you're somebody who's got millions and millions of pounds in savings, you're facing the prospect of that losing value. Like what happened in Lebanon, what's happened in Venezuela. People's entire savings have been wiped out because of inflation. So you've got kind of wealthy people, and well, actually people of all types of wealth, looking at Bitcoin and thinking, I can hold that to protect my wealth because nobody can print anymore. It can't be debased.
So that's interesting. That kind of brings up my next question I had is, what do you think is going to be the social and like government relationship to Bitcoin as it grows? Do you think it's going to be, they're just going to accept it, or do you think there's going to be some resistance?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it depends on the country, right? Somewhere like China, it kind of officially banned it and people still mine it. There's lots of restrictions in Russia and Belarus. No, not Belarus. Bolivia has banned it. Whereas places like the US and the UK and Europe, they tend to highly regulate it. It's not so much they want to ban its use. They want to make sure they can track its use. I think for two reasons. That the primary claim is, because of criminals, and they want to track what, terrorists and drug dealers aren't using Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. I think that one itself is a bit of a myth. The other main reason is the threat to tax receipts. If you've got this digital form of money that that people are using, you're unable to track it. It's very hard for them to tax. So I think that's one of the reasons that the governments take a lot of interest. But the relationship will depend on the country. A prudent country would be acquiring Bitcoin right now. If it was a prudent central bank, they would be acquiring Bitcoin and building up a store of Bitcoin like they have a store of gold. But I think that's all to be seen. I think we should expect some difficulties. Bitcoin today is trading at right now 27,020, but just hovering at $27,000, right? So when we get 50,000, 100,000 value, and the market cap starts to approach $1 trillion, maybe multiple trillions, I think we should expect there will be a reaction by government, and it depends what kind of threat they think it is. But I think in certain countries we're starting to get a regulatory moat. There's a lot of companies and people, individuals that invested in Bitcoin, and it's going to be very difficult for the government to ban it. I think they would see a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You and Gary Vee, I was listening to it because he brought up a lot of stuff about that, like governments and the relationship between it. And you guys were talking about possibly a world war over it, is what I gathered.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared well enough for those questions, actually, because I was expecting to talk to Gary about some different things, just talk about his kind of understanding and thoughts on Bitcoin, and he went down that rabbit hole. But the reality is that you can't really ban Bitcoin. You can't really ban it. They banned it in China. People still use it because it's decentralized. You can't stop somebody having a wallet on their phone or even a paper wallet and receiving Bitcoin. It's very difficult to do that. I personally think it's going to be a really interesting thing. It depends how different countries are at. But if some countries try and ban it and others don't, those countries that actually ban it are at a disadvantage, because what you potentially see is parts of the world move on to Bitcoin and they'll be falling behind. If we get to the point where countries start to settle with each other based in Bitcoin, those countries are going to be out of the loop. So, will we see a world war of it? I don't think so. I don't think we'll see a world war over Bitcoin. But remains to be seen.
Yeah. So that another interesting thing is how will countries of that scale transition from cash and that sort of thing to Bitcoin on that big of a scale? Is that going to be difficult in your eyes, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, it's tough to know. I think we just have to see these things play out. It might be a case that Bitcoin only ever is this digital gold, and it is just a currency which people want to hold and want to settle with each other on but we still operate alongside sovereign currencies. It might get to the point where actually people only want to hold Bitcoin because they feel it's the best form of money and start to reject sovereign currencies. At that point, then potentially these sovereign currencies will die because nobody wants to use it, nobody wants to hold it. These are the kind of things that are probably a multi-decade transition. If it happens, it's a multi-decade transition, and we'll remain to see how that actually happens. There is a lot of volatility in the Bitcoin currency, and now some Bitcoiners will celebrate this. They're like, well, you can't go from a brand new currency of zero value to a multi-trillion-dollar market cap without some volatility, and they're absolutely right. But it still doesn't make it particularly useful for certain people who want to transact with each other. If you're running a store and you have like thousands of goods on the shelves, you don't really want a volatile price. Countries like Venezuela have such high inflation. People go around the shop repricing things because of that. You don't really want that. So the transition, it's hard to know how it will play out, if it will play out. But all the same, I think it's not something I overly worry about. If people want to use a better form of money, it's considered a better form of money, then it will just happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so transitioning a little bit here, Bitcoin recently just hit like its all-time high, right? Just in the past like couple weeks. Did it reach?
Yesterday it went up to 28,350, I think.
And that's the highest it's ever been?
Yeah.
And now it's just kind of hovering around 27. What do you think caused that?
A number of things. It's Bitcoin does go in cycles. I told you about the mining right.
Mm-hmm.
Every day 900 Bitcoin is mined, but every 4 years the amount of Bitcoin that is in each block halves. So when Bitcoin was first released back in 2009, it was 50 Bitcoin a block. 4 years later it went to 25. 4 years later it went to 12.5, and then earlier this year it went to 6.25. So that leads to a change in the supply in the market, in that miners are only have 900 Bitcoin a day to sell into the market. So that's the first thing that happened. Secondly, we're in this weird global pandemic situation, and we're seeing governments react by printing a lot of money. But that printing of a lot of money is leading to potentially a lot of like high inflation, and people are looking, go, oh, I should probably get myself some Bitcoin. Also, these market cycles, we go through a bear market. It's been essentially like a 2 to 3 year bear market. You get to the point where all the people who want to sell are sold off, and then we get back to what is an accumulation phase where people start to want to buy again, and new people come into the market. So it's multiple things, Broc. And then what tends to happen is once it gets, there is this kind of FOMO that happens once Bitcoin starts to go up, but you start to get in the news. And if I search right now, let's do it right now for the sake of this interview. I'm going to search for Bitcoin, and I go to news on Google, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, Daily Express, Forbes, EU Report, like all these major publications are talking about Bitcoin again. It's been in the Telegraph, the Times, because there's a lot of interest, and that drives other people to be interested.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a lot of factors that have come together at the same time this year, which has led to a lot of intrigue in Bitcoin. Another thing as well, there's been a lot of corporate intrigue in Bitcoin. So there's this guy called Michael Saylor. He runs this company called MicroStrategy. His company was holding about $1 billion in their treasury. He was worried about what the value of that money would be if there was a lot of inflation. So he put $450 million into Bitcoin. And then he went and borrowed $650 million against the cash flow of his business, and he put that into Bitcoin. Square put money into Bitcoin. Ruffers, I think they're a fund, but they hold a lot of gold, something like 20 billion in gold or ridiculous. They put money into Bitcoin. Mass Mutual, an insurance company, put 100 million into Bitcoin. All these people are putting money into Bitcoin, which is leading to other companies considering this. The last bull market in 2017 was essentially retail, people like you and I buying Bitcoin. But this year has a lot of corporate and hedge fund interest in buying Bitcoin. Have you got any Bitcoin, bro?
My dad's invested a little bit in Bitcoin, not much, but we have some, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So that's kind of where my intrigue has started, was from that. He bought it when it really blew up that first time, like when nobody knew what Bitcoin was and it really exploded. So then we invested a little, and we invested in like Ripple and all that other kind of the smaller online currencies too.
Yeah, well, I tend to avoid all those. I've got no interest in any cryptocurrency outside of Bitcoin.
You think Bitcoin's top dog?
Bitcoin, I don't think it is, man.
Yeah.
You look at the market cap, developers, decentralization measures. Bitcoin is king. Everything else, we call them shitcoins.
Yeah.
Do you know why we call them shitcoins?
I can assume why.
Because they're shit.
Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, that's funny. I'll have to tell my dad to take that and invest it into Bitcoin then.
Hey, this is not financial advice, man. Let me ask you something. What are your friends talking about it? Because I haven't got any grip of the younger generations. People like you and your friends, are they talking about Bitcoin?
I would say nobody in my school talks about Bitcoin. I feel like I'm pretty like out in the meadows with that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, man. Fair enough.
But I don't know. In my like the media that I consume, it's a lot of Bitcoin, but yeah, not a lot of people at my school are talking about Bitcoin.
So you're way ahead, man. So when we go through this financial revolution, you're going to be the one way ahead of all those.
I'm hoping. I need to invest some of my own money into it. I feel like after this podcast, especially.
Yeah, dude, you need to get in, man. Join us on the Bitcoin train.
Yeah, I would love to. So you think is this gonna be the start of something like big for Bitcoin? Like you were saying in one of your podcasts that you think it's gonna get to 100K, 200K by the end of the year.
Well, yeah, there's different predictions. Different people are running different models. There's a guy called Plan B who runs a thing called a stock to flow model. His model puts Bitcoin going next year, I think, around $280,000. I've seen predictions from 1 to 300,000. They're all really super interesting and exciting. I kind of, whilst I get excited about it and interested, I also, I set myself a kind of like 10-year strategy that I would not sell any Bitcoin for 10 years. So whatever happens through this cycle, the next cycle, etc., I'm just going to wait it out. Just going to weigh that out. I'm going to wait and see what happens. So it doesn't really matter to me too much what happens next year, whether it goes to 50, 100, 200. What matters to me is that it's what happens in like over a much longer time frame. And therefore I care about things like, are there enough developers working on it? Are other people understanding why Bitcoin matters? Is the UX on the different tools good? Is that improving? Like I care about the kind of broader use case of Bitcoin and therefore the kind of like, so I'm not explaining this well, but I care about the kind of infrastructure that's being put in place and whether it's easy for people to get on board and understand it. But my play on this, Broc, is 10 years.
So you really are seeing like a big picture for Bitcoin then, if you're not going to sell anything for 10 years. So it's really going to be really prevalent in society in 10 years then.
Yeah, I think it will be bigger than gold. Certainly within 20 years, perhaps 10. You never know, even 5. I think the market cap, and I'll give you a good reason why. Bitcoin, if enough people believe in it, Bitcoin has value. That's really it. If everyone agrees that it's good money, it's the best form of money, then people will coalesce around it. I tried to buy some gold earlier this year. So I spoke to this guy I know, he's a gold trader, looked into it. I was going to put like 20 grand into gold because I was worried about inflation. I didn't want to have all my money in Bitcoin. So I went through the process and I was like, okay, what do I do? Okay, I have to create an account here. And then it was like, what kind of gold do you want? So I didn't know this. There's like different types of gold in that there's different, and it's obvious really, but there's kind of like different purities. So I was like, okay, which one do I want? I was like, okay, they have different values. And I was like, okay, how do I get it? Because I want to physically own the gold. I don't want an ETF. I want to physically, okay, so you order it, takes shipment. Like, what if I want to sell it? Well, here's how you do it. And I was thinking, God, this is a lot of effort. With Bitcoin, I literally, if I want to buy some now, go online, I press a button, and I instantly own it. Like, I take physical custody instantly.
Yeah.
If I want to sell it, I can go online, I can sell it within an hour. Like, the only reason it takes an hour is for the transaction to be confirmed on the blockchain. It's usually about an hour. But I've got instant liquidity, instant access to buying and selling and custodying myself. I was like, this is so much better than gold that there's no reason for me to buy gold. Gold would be just something I buy and stick in my attic or something and hide away. So I think once people start realizing that and start understanding why Bitcoin is better than, because it's a big leap, right, dude? It's a big leap of faith to go from that point where you're like, I have this physical lump of gold here, and then there's like this digital money on a blockchain. I feel like this is worth something because it's physical. I can hold it. It's a big leap of faith. But as people gradually move towards that, and they do take that leap, then I eventually think Bitcoin will take gold's position.
Yeah, so you would say, because I thought that investing in gold would be like a really good idea for the future for me. I was looking into that. So would you say for the average person that's trying to invest in something, go for Bitcoin 100%?
I mean, it's difficult because you don't want to give out financial advice.
No,
you tell people to buy Bitcoin and then it drops in value. For me, all I'm going to say is for me, it's the only investment I have now. Apart from investing in myself, in creating a business, I don't invest in the stock market. I don't have gold. All I have is Bitcoin, and that's all I'm interested in right now.
Gotcha. So you've used this term a couple of times called blockchain, and I had this guy on like a couple months ago, this professor that was explained blockchain. But what is the relationship? Like, how is blockchain used in Bitcoin, and how is the progression of blockchain improved Bitcoin?
So the thing about blockchain is it's essentially, the blockchain is, how do I explain this? Okay, let me think about it. Okay, so the blockchain is something that's very important to Bitcoin for how it works, but also has been overstated as what it offers to society. So a lot of other blockchains exist because the Bitcoin blockchain was very successful. They wanted to use blockchains to create other things they thought would be successful, and they haven't been. But all the blockchain is really how Bitcoin works. And think about blocks as almost like stories on a building, okay? But you can create infinite stories. So what happens is I told you about mining earlier.
Yeah.
So about every 10 minutes, a new block is created. In that block is all the transactions that have been made since the last one. So I send you some Bitcoin, you send your dad, they're in that block. Okay, it's like a record. And then what happens is a new block is created, and that sits on top. And it's all sealed by cryptography. The reason these blocks sit on top of each other is think of it like cement. Think of it like cement. Okay, once you've created that new block on top, to get rid of that and go down to the previous block's really hard. And so these blocks just build on top of each other to make it a lot more stronger. Mm-hmm. But all these blocks are blocks of transactions. And all you ever do with the blockchain is go through them to see who sent money to who and who holds what. But it's all to do with Bitcoin security. It stops. It's basically, so if I go back to this thing called this mining, the way the miners work, they all follow the blockchain. And they all build blocks on top of this blockchain. I've done a really terrible job of explaining.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm just a little bit, I'm not that far into this world, so I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, just think of it a chain of blocks. Each block has all the transactions, and every single block makes the Bitcoin more secure. So I'm trying to think of what's a good way of explaining it. Do you know what? There's people are far better explaining this than I am. That's why I usually ask the question, because I'm a bit of a dumb.
Yeah, I understand. But so blockchain essentially is just helps Bitcoin be as secure as possible.
Yeah, because what happens is people follow the strongest chain of blocks. So when the miners use a single proof of work, so they do a bunch of work to solve the algorithm. Once they solve the algorithm, it creates a new block. Okay, if you want to hack Bitcoin and create fake transactions, you actually have to outperform the miners. You have to outperform. You have to hold over 51% of the mining, and it's just too difficult to do. So all that ends up happening is people just follow the longest chain.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So
I don't think it did. I think I did a terrible job. I need to reread it myself.
No, it makes sense. Trust me. So what do you think? The government thing, just because you're a libertarian, is what I've gathered from listening to your podcast. Would you say that?
I tell you what, theoretically, I agree with everything libertarians stand for. I just don't. I think if you have 10 libertarians in a society together, all following NAP, and I think it works. But I think if you have a much bigger society, you don't always have libertarians. You have people who are selfish, mean, cruel, violent, and can do all kinds to each other. But I theoretically agree with the majority of things that libertarians stand for. I just don't. I've never seen a function in libertarian society, and I don't know how you get there. But I absolutely support the ideas, and I think libertarian ideas should be pushed to influence traditional politics a bit more. But I just don't know how you get there.
Yeah. So that's kind of how did you get into like all this Bitcoin stuff and the Bitcoin online currency world? How'd you get interested in that?
Just discovered it. Yeah. Have you ever heard of this website called the Silk Road?
A what?
The Silk Road.
Oh yeah. So that's the. Wait, Kate. Backtrack a little bit, because when I first heard of Bitcoin, I heard that was used for like the black, like the dark web, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So is that what you're talking about with the Silk Road? Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was buying weed. With Bitcoin. So that's how I heard about it. And like my friend was like, "Hey, there's this website you can buy weed with a single Bitcoin." I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, you can buy weed." I was like,
"That's crazy."
What? So so that's how I discovered it, and it just went on from there. Really, I don't smoke weed anymore, but it was kind of funny.
So so you get interested in online currency, and then how does that progress to, hey, I want to start a podcast about this?
Yeah, I mean, I tried trading, dude. I was just crap at it. I mean, I got lucky and made some money, and then I lost a bunch of money, and I just realized it wasn't for me. So I was like, my friend had a podcast. I was like, I think I'm going to do a podcast, and he told me how to do it, and I haven't looked back. I mean, dude. How many episodes have you done now?
This is like 43. I started like last year, took a couple months off. I'm hoping this year I can be a little more on the ball, but
consistent.
43.
Yeah. But you just do it, and then suddenly you've done 43 episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
And you just kind of like find yourself in this podcast world, right?
Yeah.
With your Shaw mic.
Yeah. It's been fun so far. But so that's crazy. How many episodes are you on right now?
My Bitcoin show's done like 292 or something, and then my other show's done like 70 or 80. I've got this other show, Defiance. So I don't know, like 350 to 400 episodes now.
So Defiance, you just produced that?
Yeah. So I that started out as another show doing interviews and didn't really work. So I said to my buddies, I think we should make like mini documentaries.
Yeah.
And he was keen. So we made one about this band called The Ghost Inside. We made one about Ghislaine Maxwell.
I've been listening to that one.
Well, so that's my buddy. He's got a far better voice than me. He's got a really good voice for podcasts. And that's somebody I went to school with. I've known since I was like 10. So yeah, we just decided to, like, it's just something different. The Bitcoin stuff's great, but sometimes you just want to do something else.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. Well, do you have anything else that you want to kind of talk about before we wrap this up?
No, man. Just tell me, what's Utah like?
Utah, I don't know. I've been to most of the other states, and Utah is just the best one in my opinion. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to like get out of here as soon as possible because I've lived in this town my whole life, 1,500 people, rural Utah, like nothing around us, and I was just like, I gotta get out of here. So then, the past couple of years, I've been traveling around the country and seeing all these different states, and now I'm like, this is the best one in my opinion.
Is it Utah where Post Malone moved to?
Yeah, he lives up in the northern part of Utah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I had an interview with him. He was like, he just fell in love with Utah.
Yeah, I think he just likes the people, is what he's been saying in a lot of stuff.
Does Utah border Nevada?
Yeah. I'm like 3 hours from Vegas.
I think I might have driven through a tiny bit of Utah on the way to Vegas.
Yeah, you might have.
I think I might have dipped in. Yeah, I think I might have dipped in. But
yeah,
cool, man.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome over here. So,
all right.
Okay, Well,
thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're pretty busy. You're pumping out podcasts left and right. Every time I'm looking at Instagram, there's a new podcast. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on.
No worries, dude. I wish you the best with your show, man.
Yeah, you too. That was Peter McCormack. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, please review, okay? Because that helps me a lot. Share it with your friends. If you have somebody that is interested in Bitcoin, share it with them, because this is pretty knowledgeable stuff. This is the pros talking here. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, do your thing, because it supports me, and I appreciate that a lot. I appreciate Peter coming on. That was awesome. Thanks for listening, guys. Love you. Have a great week. See you next Saturday or Tuesday if you're on the Patreon. Go subscribe to the Patreon. It's $5 a month. Go subscribe to the Patreon. Every Tuesday, an episode will drop. Okay? And thank you, and good night.